So Amish and most Anabaptists generally they don't sign up for war.
I think you had mentioned something about do they have guns and that kind of thing. It's not for war. They would go hunting. So there is hunting within the Amish community. And so having guns for food, but not guns that would be used to kill people. And so you wouldn't go to war. You wouldn't have handguns and that kind of thing normally, because those would be used to kill people, not animals. If you would be going to war, you'd be kicked out of the Amish church.
I have a good friend who I taught with at our Catholic school, and he's a devout Quaker. And it was a very challenging time during Vietnam. He got criminally charged. He was in court, and he was like one of the first ones in the nation to get acquitted, and he didn't have to go fight in Vietnam. And so he'd come in and tell his story to my classroom, because we'd be talking about like the challenging between like just war theory and peacemaking, and how do you live the Christian life when we're living in such a fallen, violent world. If someone broke into an Amish person's house, is the dad going to go grab his gun? What are they going to do? It's the same type of principle, right? Like, it's just we're talking about more people. I would wonder what they would do.
Yeah. No, the answer there is no.
Mm.
They would not. I mean, they would not be expected to, at least. I'm not saying they never would, but as an Amish person, the correct answer would be no, I will not do that. There's actually a story when America had a lot of frontier and Indians and white men were fighting. And there was a village where the Indians came in and captured a lot of people and killed a lot of people and that kind of thing. But then there's this one family who left the latchkey out to signal that they can come in, and refuse to do anything to protect themselves. And that family was saved. And so the Indians didn't kill that family. And so that story is one of those stories that circulates among the Amish community quite a bit. Say, no, even for self-defense, do not do this. It is better to die than to kill someone else. And that's sort of a big part of the ethos is, no, I am ready to give up my life, but I am not ready to kill anyone else.
That's a beautiful story and very powerful. And I think there's a lot of truth in it too. Andy Griffith didn't carry a gun, and he had a very peaceful Mayberry. He's kind of a similar model. St. Francis walked across, to meet the Sultan. There is like this peacemaking tradition in the Franciscan tradition within the Catholic Church of, we had all these crusades to win the Holy Land back, and they all basically in the end didn't work out. But it was Francis who was this peacemaker who talked to the Sultan, walked barefoot to him, and he's the one that ended up with the keys to the Holy Land. They gave the Franciscans like, hey, yeah, have access to your churches, and the Franciscans have been there ever since. And so there is something to be said about that truth that Jesus passes on to us.
Exactly. I love the St. Francis comment of Dante picks up on that in the Divine Comedy. I was reading through that recently again, and it was like, wait a minute, I forgot this was in here, but basically him meeting the Sultan is mentioned right in there. And I was like, wow, this is an amazing story, because it really does, for Dante, it does the work of showing what it means to have a real Christ-like heart versus some of the other people who were actually trying to do by force what Francis did peacefully.
Dante's good about showing the complexities of Catholicism, because he puts a pope in hell, the bottom pit, and then he puts this peacemaking Francis, up top. And so we're not an uncritical tradition or just like listening to our higher ups no matter what. Like, no, there's a true apostolic passing on of what it means to be a Christian. In the ancient church, the early church, the Christians didn't typically sign up to fight for the Roman Empire.
And the Amish definitely tell that story repeatedly. I do think the question of disassociating Christianity from empire was really heavily on Christians' minds at the beginning. And then it became part of it, but it's also like, wait a minute, do we want to step back and say, well, the empire shouldn't be Christian? We don't want to say that either. And so I think that's where a lot of questions entered in that the early church didn't have to deal with, because there was no sense that they would become empire at the very beginning.
The empire did serve a purpose for establishing like canonical boundaries on like, this is what Christianity is, and like Arianism's not, which Arianism was gigantic. People kind of forget that it wasn't like a small little side story. Northern Europe was dominated by the Arian crisis all the way up until like Charlemagne, and he kind of used violence to change the picture.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is interesting though to think about how church history has shaped all of our groups, and even in ways like this that I never even thought about.
It's always a messy picture, because you may not have done the violence yourself to keep these groups at bay, but you still are somehow benefiting.
That's right. one of the questions, the hard questions for pacifists is always like, well, wait a minute. I'm not willing to fight, but yet I get the benefits of other people fighting for me. And so I think that makes it hard to just say I'm a pacifist. That's it.